Joining us right now on this story and much more is Democratic Congressman Khanna of California. His district is in the heart of Silicon Valley. In fact, on Monday, the congressman co-introduced the Repeal the TikTok Ban Act. And Congressman, thank you for being with us this morning. Let's talk about this. This act that you introduced was along with Rand Paul, the senator from Kentucky. It is bipartisan. It is bicameral. And it would overturn a law that Congress voted for overwhelmingly last year. What's changed, and do you think you actually have the support to get this passed?
Well, millions of Americans spoke out when TikTok was going dark, saying this is our livelihoods. I talked to a mom of 4 kids who was broke and relies on the app to make $60,000 a year. I talked to people who use it to pay rent, and there was outrage. And I think that this has captured the attention of many members of Congress and senators. And by the way, many of them used TikTok to campaign in just the last election. So I think the attitude is changing.
Congressman, the lobbying that was coming from the millions of people who use TikTok started well before the original law was passed by Congress overwhelmingly. In fact, there were times where Congress's switchboard was getting shut down by the numbers of people who were calling in. At that point, Congress voted for it, and those who were supporting it said that they thought it was a spying device that can or could or would be used against the American public, and they thought it was a security risk. Has that changed?
Well, the volume has gone 10 to 1. I mean, I voted against the original ban, as did Senator Rand Paul. But the amount of people talking then were a small group coming to the Capitol. We got 1.3 million people to sign a petition to stop this in 48 hours. So the intensity is far more. You also have the hypocrisy of many of the same members of Congress and senators who voted for the ban telling their campaign staffs to maximize their followers in this past election. But look, there are legitimate security risks. The question is, can you mitigate them and prevent them without banning the app? And I will work with President Trump and Michael Waltz, who I know well as National Security Advisor, on a solution. We can get the data stored in the United States. I would love to see 50% ownership by the U.S. There's already 60% U.S. investors. And we can make sure that it's a crime to have any algorithmic interference from a foreign adversary. But let's work on a constructive solution. And frankly, I give the administration credit for being open to work on that.
The question has always been whether the algorithm could be controlled by China. You just said that you wouldn't go along with that, but that has been something that the Chinese government has not been willing to bend on or to acknowledge. So you're in favor of repealing the ban. Is that with the understanding that they would give up the algorithm, that the United States would own 50%, or you just don't want to mess with this at this point?
Well, I would want to have some safeguards. I think the ban was overbroad, but I think we would need at least a law saying that the U.S. executives of TikTok will be held liable, civilly and criminally, if there's any evidence that they're colluding with the Chinese Communist Party to tinker with the algorithms. And you can pass that law. Now, if those executives then face a choice where the Chinese Communist Party tells them to change something, then they would be in violation of the U.S. law, and they'd have to face the consequences. But my problem with the ban was it was overbroad. There was no evidence, actually, that this was happening in any systematic way. It was a hypothetical. And why not try to resolve it like we're hopefully going to do in the next 75 days?
I think Andrew has a question from Davos. Andrew?
Congressman, I'm so glad to hear you say this, because I've been making this argument for a very long time that we haven't actually seen real evidence. Does that mean that the American public and the Supreme Court has been lied to?
Well, look, Andrew, we have a history in this country with national security of times of overreach. We had it with FDR, with the Japanese internment camp. We had it during communism with McCarthyism. And my view is that this was a collective march of understandable fear with the Chinese Communist Party. But we just passed a ban without really thinking of the ramifications of 170 million Americans. And there were narrower ways to do this.
Right. But, Congressman, the reason I mention this is we had people come on our air, your colleagues and peers, and say not just that this was a prospective threat in the future, that was always on the table, but that this product was being misused, meaning Effectively, the government was controlling this company, was asking this company to do things and surveil people and do things that they were not supposed to be doing. And it sounds like you were saying, given that you've had private access to a lot of these meetings, that that part may not have been true.
Well, without going into any obviously sensitive briefings, I am of the belief that there has not been any public evidence or any reason to believe that there's been systematic algorithmic interference by the Chinese government. And by the way, people who are actually on the app, who are not just listening to a few Beltway D.C. folks, would see that. I mean, spend a day on TikTok. It may not be the best thing to do, but at least spend an hour or two and then make these decisions. And the hypocrisy, again, I want to just point out, because everyone was using it to campaign. So I do think that this is going to be now resolved. And in my view, we jumped the gun.
Congressman, I do want to point out, TikTok has admitted to using its app to spy on journalists in an effort to try and track down their sources. That maybe you think that was an isolated incident, but again, you have status and clearance that we don't. You don't think that there's any risk here?
Well, look, if they did that and admitted that, there should be penalties for that. None of the social media apps, of course, have had clean hands. I mean, there has been allegations of foreign interference on other apps. There's certainly been allegations of data breaches. Data brokers are selling American data to the Chinese. So if we want to have a strong data privacy app law, let's do that. If we want to have a strong law making it illegal for any interference by an adversary on algorithms, let's do that. But to just ban the app is what went too far, and I don't think the evidence justified that, certainly in the public record.